I've been sailing on this catamaran for the last couple of weeks. I had to know, is it actually as bad as people say? And I have a verdict. I'm telling you, catamarans, they actually suck. Oh, man. Okay, guys, I came to the bathroom because the owner is very touchy whenever I say anything bad about catamarans. But yeah, here in the bathroom, I think we're safe. We can. Yes?
I know you're filming.
No, no, I'm not. I'm taking a huge dump.
Yeah, a huge dump on the internet, sure.
Okay, I'll be right out. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you later. Okay, we're finally safe here. I can tell you the truth about my experience sailing this catamaran for about 2 weeks. I'm sorry I couldn't do it on the catamaran, but it was a hostile work environment. However, I have the same shirt for continuity. I sailed on this Seawind 1160 for about 2 weeks. We sailed from Malaga, Spain to Faro in Portugal. We avoided marinas, so we anchored multiple times, and we even got to dry out the boat, which was cool. It was a new experience for me. The things that I'm going to talk about on this video are not the theoretical differences between a catamaran and a monohull. I am only going to talk about the things that I actually experienced, and I'm going to compare it to my experience sailing monohulls. So maybe this comparison should not even be done. If you think about it, we are comparing two very different things. It's like comparing a Lamborghini to a Toyota Hilux. Which is better? It's not about being better, it's about being different. So I'm going to point out the clear differences that one can see while changing from a monohull to a catamaran or from a catamaran to a monohull. This is Starry Night, a courageous, plucky sailboat who has only one dream: to sail around the world and have lots of adventures. No, not like that. It's around the world, not through it. But not everything was going to plan. Starry Night was abandoned on the heart for 12 full years. But one day, he found us. My name is Paulo, and this is Caterina, and these are our two very overactive kids. After a crazy amount of work, Starry Night is once again ready to sail the oceans. So sit back, relax, and join us in this adventure, and we will all find out together where Starry Night will end up next. One thing to be aware of when you see the footage I'm about to show you is that we were sailing up the coast of Spain and Portugal against the wind in the Atlantic. You know, there's a reason why the Vikings and the Portuguese used monohulls and longboats to discover the world, while the Polynesians used two canoes fastened together and warums to do the same thing. The sailing area is completely different, and what we were doing is not the best conditions to use a catamaran. The way we're going to do this so that it doesn't get brought out of context by having a bunch of negative stuff or a bunch of positive stuff, let's do a positive and a negative and so on. The first thing that I noticed immediately upon starting sailing this catamaran was the wave slamming on the bridge hull, on the underside of the boat. It gets loud. It gets so loud that you can hear the rigging vibrate as the waves hit the bottom of the boat. Now, I had never experienced this, and at first I was a little bit, concerned, bothered by it. However, the people that were with me were totally accustomed to it, and they didn't even notice it anymore. And I have to admit, after like 3 or 4 days, I wouldn't even notice it anyway. If a wave hits the bottom and it makes a lot of noise, it's just part for the course, and the boat is designed to do that. So, it's not a problem. But it is different from a monohull. You don't get that on a monohull. On a positive note, the outside living space on this thing is amazing. Not only do you have the trampolines up in the front, which are really fun, a bunch of deck space to have, bean bags and all of that, and also the deck is at the same level as the saloon, which is really cool, and it was really nice to have on anchorage. Now this next one heavily depends on which monohull you compare it to, because I know it happens to some monohulls, especially the very light monohull types, but it happens more on the catamarans, which is that they are super susceptible to the wave motion. If you're going upwind, when you get hit by a wave, the whole thing kind of stops because you have two hulls trying to, pass through the wave. It is big, it is super light, so the size to lightness makes it so that it gets stopped and it's difficult to make progress going against the wave. A ratio that I kind of find makes sense to me is that a 1 meter wave on a catamaran is like a 3 meter wave on a monohull. One very positive thing is that this catamaran can be beached, like no problem at all. You get to an anchorage and you don't even worry about the tides. If the water goes out, it just, it's on the bottom and you're fine. And then the water comes back and lifts off the boat and you're fine again. That is really cool to have. I know that some monohulls do that too, especially swing keels and bilge keels, but most of them don't. So this is a cool thing to be able to do. You get to go into more anchorages that we on our boat just can't go. Here's another negative that I noticed immediately when we started going upwind, which is the lack of ability to make way. What I mean by this is, we point the boat at 30 degrees, but when you look on the plotter, you're not doing 30 degrees. The best we got was like 90 degrees to the wind, which is not that good, let's be honest. But then again, like I said before, it's very affected by the motion of the waves, and each wave that comes pushes the catamaran a little bit back. Well, the GoPro... Whoa! That's a mistake! What the f...
Yeah, that was open.
Also, the wind and the winded area, because the catamaran is so light, pushes it back again. So although when you're sailing, it looks like you're doing 30 degrees to the wind, if you look at the chart and the ley line that you've just put down, it's like 90 degrees at best. Even though all of this was going on and the waves were hitting the hull and coming over the deck and slamming on underneath the boat, the center of the boat is super stable. Which, one of the things that kind of impressed me was that we had this bug spray repellent on the table and it was there all the time without falling over. Well, it fell over once, but most of the time it was just on the table and it didn't fall over. So the center of this boat is super, super stable. And that might be very good for people who get, motion sickness, or something like that. Yeah, stability on the center was amazing. We've talked about this a little bit before, but now it's in the context of speed. Catamarans are so slow going upwind. So slow, it's ridiculous. We did the exact same trip last year on our boat. Similar conditions, similar type of wind, everything is the same in the same place. So in our boat, I know that when we get from 15 to 17, 18 knots of wind going to it, we can easily do 6 to 7 knots. Like, it's not a problem at all. And we're not even trying. We point 35 degrees, we go 6 to 7 knots, and it's fine. So in the catamaran, we were doing 3 to 4.5 knots with the exact same conditions going upwind. So yeah, it is a slow process. However, we had time, so it was fine. We just pointed up the wind, tacked a bunch, and we got there in the end. So in the end, it was more time we spent having fun sailing. But yeah, that whole thing about catamarans being faster, not always. I mean, really, not always. On a positive note, this thing is a rocket ship going downwind. You barely need any wind at all. As soon as the wind passes the beam, you're going. And it's really fast. At one time, I think we had like 12 knots of wind and we were still doing like 8 knots of boat speed, which is really cool. So yeah, if you have a catamaran, just go downwind, unless you have to go upwind. Well, okay, this negative is my experience. So please don't kill me for it, because some of you might not, agree with this. But the motion of the catamaran is super fast, unpredictable, and very uncomfortable for me. Okay? This is just my opinion. It doesn't have to be your opinion as well. What happens is, let me get a prop. So let's say this is a monohull. Actually, let me put it like this because it's easier. So this is a monohull and you're going to the wind, or you're going and you're sailing and you're doing your stuff. The way it moves is like it turns to one side and then it slowly stops and it turns to the other side if you're wobbling about. But most of the time what happens is you have the wind coming from one side, it goes like to, I don't know, 10, 15 degrees heel, and then it stays there. It kind of leans a little bit less, leans a little bit more, but it stays stabilized at that angle. Now, catamaran doesn't do this. What it does is it starts leaning to one side, and then you having the legs for a monohull, you start to compensate because you're thinking you're gonna go that way, but then all of a sudden it goes like, I'm going the other way really fast, and it goes like this. So the motion is something like this all of the time, which is very disconcerting for someone who is used to monohull. However, after like 3 or 4 days, you get used to it and you start not trusting your legs to do the Jack Sparrow thing, and you start just holding on to things because the boat can just at that time go to the other side. This also happens a lot because you have different waves hitting the hulls at different times, and the catamaran is bobbing around a little bit. And because it is very, very light, it does this very, very fast. When you are sailing, the protection from the winds and the waves and the water and the rain and whatever is amazing. You are at the same level at everything while you have access to the hull and the instruments and all of that. And if you don't want, you will never feel the wind in your face. I know some of you are like, yeah, but that's not really sailing. Look, it's very comfortable. If you're spending months on end, sometimes you just want to be protected, and the protection inside this catamaran is really, really good. Monohulls do this too to some extent, and it comes back to the fast motion, which is if you're at anchorage and you get a wake from a passing boat, or you have a little swell on the anchorage, because they hit the hulls at different times, the catamaran does like, rolling around fast because it's light, and that's, it can be a little disconcerting, but it's fine. For the most part, it's fine. It's better than the monohulls that when they get the right frequency, they start to death roll, and they do it exponentially more, and then it really, really sucks. And then you need to point your boat to the wave somehow by using a catch anchor or something like that. But yeah, for those of you who think that a catamaran is super stable at anchor, it is if the anchorage is, calm. But if it's calm, then a monohull is going to be calm as well. So that's something to bear in mind. Because it has different hulls, it has more privacy. Maybe you are a family or two couples, and the fact that you can get one hull for each person gives you a bigger sense of privacy. It's not like we're all crammed inside of the same tube. It looks like we're all crammed inside of two separate tubes, which is better. The lack of rudder response at slow speeds. If you're going below 1.5 knots, let's say, your rudders do absolutely nothing. Because it is very wide and it has two keels inside of the water, if you're going slow, your rudders are not going to do anything to change the direction of the catamaran. So it's fine if you're like in the marina because you use your engines to, one forward, one back, and you can turn yourself 360 degrees if you want. Where it gets weird is when you're trying to tack, and because you are going against the wind, right? The catamaran is already going slow because it's slow by nature going against the wind. So you're doing like 4 knots. What we tried to do to tack correctly was veering off the wind a little bit, building up speed to like 5 knots, and then turn the boat all the way to the other side to tack. But the problem is that if you can't manage to keep the speed at least 1.5 to 2 knots, your rudders are not going to be able to turn the boat into the other tack, and you have to start over again or just go around and do it again. Yeah, so I found that like it's not really cool that it happens. All of them have two engines, which is awesome for redundancy. If one fails, you just have the other engine, and that is very cool because it takes a little bit of the weight off from your shoulders, especially when you're doing coastal navigation. I'm always a little bit worried that I had bad fuel or that the filters might clog up, and that if I lose the engine, in our case we still have the electric one, but it's, you know, it's not that powerful, so I'm always a little bit worried. And having two of them kind of helps because you always have redundancy. That's a positive thing. Being protected by the weather is very cool and very good for the crew, but it has a big downside, which is that you can't feel the wind. And because the monohull doesn't heal as much, it still heals, but it doesn't heal as much, you don't get a sense that you need to reef. So you have to do it by the numbers. Because on a monohull, you easily know that you're overpowered because it starts leaning and, you know, you start feeling it. On a cat, you really kind of don't. If you're just, you have to look at the numbers. And the owner of the catamaran actually told me that catamarans look beginner friendly, but they are definitely not, because it's so much easier to make a grave mistake on a catamaran than a monohull. Because, you know, a monohull starts to lean, and even the noob goes like, oh crap, I need to do something about the fact that I'm getting my rail in the water. On a catamaran, you don't feel it, everything looks fine, you don't hear nothing stupid until all of a sudden your rig, it's just gone. So yeah, that could be interpreted as a negative. They are not so beginner friendly as most people think they are. Actually, I just saw a video the other day. Two couples go on a catamaran, they go for a passage. They lost engine number 1 because of a battery, they lost engine number 2 because of overheating, then they lost the mast, and then they get rescued by a cruising ship. So, you know, it's not very beginner friendly. Okay, on the positive side, what is there here? I'm running out of positive things to say, and I still have some negative ones. Did I talk about the trampolines? Trampolines are awesome. On Anchorage and while watching dolphins, they are really, really cool. Strong winds against the current make the chain rub against the hull. I feel like I need to explain this a little bit. So, if you're going up the coast of Portugal or Spain, for that matter, a lot of places in the world, the only protected anchorages are in places where there's a river. You know, you go inside a river. Now, because we have 3-4 meter tides, every 6 hours the tide changes and it goes up with all the water getting into the river and into the anchorage, and then it goes down with all of the water getting out again. Now, this is normally fine if there is no wind, because when the water is going up, your boat turns into the place where the water is coming from, and you have your anchor on this side, and you're fine. And then when it changes, your boat just veers around and it goes to the other side. Now, the problem comes when you have strong winds, because let's imagine this. You have the current coming from this side, okay? Your anchor line is going here. Now, if the current is coming from this side and the wind is coming from this side, you're fine. Your boat is going to stay like this. But if the wind comes from the opposite side and it's strong enough, what it does is it points your boat into the wind. But it doesn't push your boat back into the current because it's not strong enough for that. So now your chain is coming out like this. And on a monohull, usually because the monohull is like this, the chain, even going back, doesn't touch the hull. But on a catamaran, you have two hulls and the chain comes out in the middle. So it goes back and it rubs against the hull. So I don't know if there's a good way to solve this issue, but if there is, let us know down. Maybe have the bridle attached lower, but then that comes with another set of problems. So I don't really know. But yeah, that's an issue. Apart from this last problem, notice that all of the issues that I mentioned are related to sailing, and all the positives are related to living aboard in comfort. So I guess that's the takeaway. It depends on what you want to do with the boat. If you're thinking of sailing a lot, crossing oceans all the time, I don't know, maybe a catamaran is not the best. But if you, like most people, you're thinking you're going to be 90% of your time on anchorage, maybe you should consider a catamaran. Now, if you ask me, would I ever buy a catamaran? You know, my mind has been changed a little bit. It used to be not in a million years. I don't want a catamaran. I don't want to have anything to do with them. And after sailing in this catamaran for 2 weeks, my mind has been changed a little bit. From not in a million years to, maybe when I'm older, I don't want to go around the world anymore. I just want to go someplace where the weather is nice and I want to spend much of my time on anchor. I would definitely consider a catamaran for that. Just not for what we're doing right now. So, yeah, though that was my experience sailing a catamaran. It was pretty awesome, and I want to thank the people that made it possible. And if you're still watching this video, you're a hero. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.